Excelsior! Avengers Assemble! And all those other Marvel catchphrases. Thanks for joining me. I'm Jonathan here from Roll for Crit. In this video, I will be giving you a rundown and ranking of all of the currently available Marvel Legendary expansions. That's Legendary, a Marvel deck-building game from Upper Deck. You can see this copy right here is well-loved and well-worn. Big fans of this game over at Roll for Crit. We all love it. I love it. Now, I'm going to be separating these into two categories, the small box expansions and the big box expansions, because honestly, I feel like it's kind of unfair to compare the small ones to the big ones. There's just way more going on in those. But in order from my least favorite to my most favorite, starting with the small boxes, I'm not going to go in detail on how the characters work, maybe except for a few highlights. But if you're someone who just got started, wants to know where to go next, or you just want to argue with what I think, this video may be for you. At the bottom of my list is Fear itself, the small expansion that was actually technically for the Villains Edition base set of Marvel Legendary. This is a small box that includes some villains from the Fear itself storyline in the comics, which I'm not super familiar with, which probably contributes to part of why it wasn't that exciting for me. Also, the villain set, which we'll talk about a little bit later, isn't super exciting, and these aren't like big name characters or anything. There is some interesting stuff in there. You've got heroes like Greythoth and Noir, all with these little subtitles like Destroyer of Worlds, things like that. And for the most part, they're fine. They work okay. There's one ability that Noir has where everybody has to slam their hands on the table, which I really don't like. Again, we'll talk about more things similar to that later on. There is some cool stuff, like I said, like also there's thrown artifacts in this one. Artifacts are introduced in the Guardians of the Galaxy expansion. In this version, there are some cards where if you throw them, they go at the bottom of your deck and give you an ability, which is kind of cool because it's reminiscent of stuff like Thor's hammer, which comes up in this set. So it's an okay expansion, but not my favorite. In fact, my least favorite. Next up is the SpiderMan Homecoming expansion, based directly on the SpiderMan Homecoming film. This, of course, very controversial set because it is the only set, as of this recording, to include stills from the cinematic universe, not original art from the comic books. There is going to be a base set based on the movies coming out later this year that will maybe make this one feel a little more part of the system, part of the set naturally. But as it stands right now, it sort of sticks out like a sore thumb. Some things I do like about this one, it adds the coordinate keywords from the Legendary Encounter sets, which is a really cool thing that gives the game a more competitive, opposite of that, cooperative feel, which I really like. And there's definitely some interesting, unique things in there. You get to play as Peter's friends, including Aunt May, and you get to fight villains such as the Vulture and just parts of the Vulture, like his hands and his feet, basically his suit. Basically, they didn't have a lot to draw, and they're just going from one movie. But, that's okay. I also like the danger sensibility that lets you look at cards from the villain deck and possibly get more attack power if you kind of sense villains, which is a cool kind of thematic spider sense thing that happens. But overall, the art and just the kind of uninspired nature of it feels sort of like a forced tie-in to me. Not great, not the worst. Homecoming. After that, we've got the Deadpool expansion. Deadpool and a bunch of his friends are in there, including Bob from Hydra, Solo and Stingray, beloved characters by all. This one is definitely more on sort of the party end of the gameplay spectrum when it comes to Legendary expansions. Definitely, I think, benefits from being a multiplayer experience. It's not really the kind of thing that I like, that I want in this game. It has a lot of abilities that break the fourth wall, which is very on theme for Deadpool. I can't fault them for putting that stuff in there, but it includes abilities that may trigger, for instance, depending on what time of day it is, or depending on whether or not someone at the table is taller or shorter than you are. Stuff like that, which can be kind of fun and goofy, just not usually my cup of tea. But the reason this is a little not at the bottom of my list is because I do think there are some cool keywords that they added to this one. Excessive violence rewards you for overkill, essentially, for doing more damage to a villain than necessary to defeat them. There's also a new thing called revenge, where you may have to worry about having certain villains in your villain pile. of the same type, which I liked. Some of the cards have 1/2 number counts, so it'll be worth 4.5 attack, which is different and weird and kind of pointless, but it's okay. It's kind of funny. I don't mind that too much. So I thought there was some good and bad in this, but it's definitely one that is more centered on groups who kind of just want to have a more lighthearted time. It fits Deadpool, not my thing, but they did a good job with it. Next, we have the Champions expansion. This is the newest expansion as of this recording, which brings together the group of young champions. Again, I'm sure you all know and love, like the new Hulk, Nova, and Gwenpool, all in there. Of course, Gwenpool, maybe not actually part of the Champions. I don't know. Read up on the lore yourself if you want to. This is kind of a fun one that has, I think, a couple of really cool schemes in it. In particular, there is one where it's sort of a Clash of the Monsters gladiator battle, where everyone chooses a villain from their pile and has to take them out against a monster that comes up, and whoever has a lower number takes a wound. There's also a very interesting one where you actually separate out the piles of hero cards by type. And so, normally it's just random what comes out, but in this sense, you can actually tailor your deck to what you want, but there's a danger that one of those piles might be wiped out completely, which I really like, really changes up the game. Very interesting stuff. It also reuses a few keywords from earlier sets, which is something that we're always encouraging them to do because there are so many keywords and sometimes they don't give them their due diligence. Demolish comes back, I believe. Versatile and size changing are all in there, along with another one, cheering crowds, which I think is cool because it's another thing that helps you replay a card based on your bystanders that you have, which is cool. I like when they give you something new to do with those bystanders that you can collect. So this one, pretty much middle of the pack for me, Champions. My next one is the Captain America 75th Anniversary expansion. Important distinction because this includes a bunch of different types of Captain Americas. You've got Falcon Captain America, as well as 1941 Captain America. Steve Rogers, Captain of S.H.I.E.L.D. is in there, plus a couple of other characters. And so if you love Captain America, this is definitely the set to go for. This has one of my favorite, weirdest schemes in the game, which is where you can go back in time and try to prevent or change the outcome of World War II that actually separates your city up into different regions depending on the twists that come out, such as Poland and other actual territories involved in World War II, which is a very weird kind of thing, but very on brand for Captain America, as well as the new keyword Man Out of Time that also lets you use cards more than once. Again, appropriate. I also really like the Savior keyword. That is another thing that rewards you for having bystanders, because I appreciate when you actually want to feel like a superhero. Captain America is a nice guy. He's going out there out of his way to help people. This is a fun one. If you like Captain America, go get it. Next on the list is Paint the Town Red, which is the Spider-Man themed expansion, the other Spider-Man themed expansion for the legendary deck building game. This one includes a bunch of spider heroes: Spider-Woman, Scarlet Spider, the Symbiote Spider, or Symbiote if you're from the new Venom movie, perhaps. It's up to you how you want to say it. And the thing about Spider-Man in this game is all of his cards are 2 costs, and that goes for pretty much all of the spider-themed heroes as well. So I sometimes kind of struggle with how much I like that technique, that theme. Sometimes it feels like the Spider-Man cards aren't as strong because of that. They're all in the lower cost, but they also allow you to pull off some kind of ridiculous combos if you have a bunch of spider characters together. So this is definitely a set that works well with itself, as well as being mixed with spider characters from other sets. Wall Crawl, I think, is the major new keyword in this one that lets you recruit cards that go directly to the top of your deck, which can really help you out with planning future turns. For Masterminds, this one also comes with Carnage, who has a Feast ability, which can be really devastating at killing cards from the top of your deck. And Mysterio, who I love thematically because he actually has multiple copies of his Mastermind card, and after you kill him, you may not have killed the correct one, which I think is really funny, and again, really fits that character well. So I like this one. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, so just for the fact that they have some cool new Spider-Man characters in there, I really appreciate, but not my favorite. Number 3 on my list is the Noir expansion, based on the series of Marvel Noir comics, where they took existing characters and kind of put them in the 20s and gave them trench coats, that kind of a thing. It comes with a Noir version of Spider-Man, Daredevil, Luke Cage, and a few others. Really cool theme. I love that kind of noir stuff. And the way that they integrate it, I think, is done really nicely. There's a new investigate ability that lets you look through your deck or look at the top 2 cards of your deck for a certain type of card for an ability. There's also a thing called witnesses, where bystanders will be in front of certain villains, and you're going to have to pay recruit points to get rid of them before you can attack, which is a small thing, but it does kind of do a good job of making you feel like, oh, you actually do have to kind of question witnesses and track the villain down before you can fight them. And some of the schemes are really cool. There's one that has to do with the 5 families that kind of splits up each city into a different region, like the crime families splitting up New York. And then there is one that I really like that almost turns the game into sort of a Clue-esque mystery, where you're trying to find the split personality killer. There's going to be a deck of hero cards, and throughout the game, you can look at some of the cards in that deck secretly, and you're trying to be the one to guess before your other players which card has the most of the same hero type in there, and that hero turns out to be the secret killer, which is just a really fun thing. And some of those cards are cool and fun to play with. So overall, I just thought this was a good integration of theme into the mechanics. I liked Noir. Number 2 on my list of small expansions is the Fantastic Four expansion, which was out of print for a while, but now it's available again. Of course, this includes the Fantastic Four themselves, along with the Silver Surfer, and Masterminds Galactus and Mole Man, because, you know, Mole Man's cool. Mole Man has a burrow keyword, which is kind of neat, that villains, if you defeat them in a certain place, might come back up other places in the city, which is really annoying, but funny. There's also the Focus keyword, which is one of my favorite keywords, honestly, I think, throughout the Legendary set, that lets you use your recruit points for other abilities and actions other than just buying cards, which really frees up your turn and lets you kind of change your options up. It feels more unique to those characters. Of course, the Fantastic Four tends to work better together. A bunch of them have different abilities that only trigger based on other Fantastic Four members. So this isn't a set that often works well mixed in with the larger game. You really need to make sure sometimes you have those Fantastic Four characters in there. But I like that. I like when the sets are sort of more personalized, more thematic to themselves. I mean, it makes sense. They're a team, so they should kind of work together with themselves. Also just has some really cool abilities. I really like Mr. Fantastic. He's really good at drawing cards. I really appreciated that. There's also a cool scheme in there called the Negative Zone that switches recruit and attack points, which is really unique, really changes up your strategies as you play the game. I like Fantastic Four. I'm glad it's available again. That's my number 2. And my personal favorite of these small box expansions is the Guardians of the Galaxy, which of course comes with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Of course, there's many of them, but it's specifically the ones from the most recent movies that have become popular now. Again, like Fantastic Four, this is one that really operates well within itself, and it feels like these guys kind of are a team together. It almost feels like one of the ones that is kind of a standalone expansion you can really play as its own entry, which I appreciate. This is the one that, as I said at the top, introduced artifacts, which is a great mechanic. They're cards that you can actually keep in front of you for abilities that recur from turn to turn. I love that. It makes you feel really strong and really cool. And then there's also these shards, which are little tokens that you can get, Infinity Stone shards, and you can actually trade them in or bank them up for big turns as attack points later on. Again, really cool. It really gives you some versatility. So maybe there's a lot of times where you have, oh, I'm just one away from being able to fight that villain. With shards, you can do it. You can spend a shard and you feel good about yourself. And of course, this includes a scheme for the Infinity Gauntlet, trying to stop Thanos, who is one of the masterminds. Because of those shards and artifacts, those are two of my favorite things that they added to Legendary. They've never really done anything like shards that I can think of. That's a really unique thing where you actually have your own cardboard tokens outside the game. That's why it's my favorite. Plus, Rocket and Groot, they're good. Next, I'm going to move on to the large box expansions for Legendary. First, kind of an honorable mention is the Villains, which is technically a base set, but you can sort of treat it like an expansion if you already have the base game. So honorable mention / also kind of the bottom of my list. If it had to go on there, it's cool. It's fun to play as the villains. It's sort of novel. It does add some things I like the dodge keyword and the Madam Hydra cards, which I think are an improvement over the original Maria Hill cards that you can buy. There's also bindings, which work sort of like wounds do in the original game, but you can actually give them to other players. In general, there's more of a PvP kind of feel to this one, which makes sense because you're playing as villains. You don't actually want to help each other at all. But overall, it's probably one that you want to save for later. If you're starting out, I would recommend you just go with the regular old base set right there. So first real entry on this list is the Civil War expansion, which of course comes from the Civil War storyline from the comics and includes characters related to that. Maria Hill is in there actually as one of the masterminds. Iron Man is in there as a mastermind for his second time. Some other characters like Peter Parker, just Peter Parker, Tigra or Tigra, probably Tigra, right? Because she's a tiger, I don't know. Also Cloak and Dagger, who I really like, and the Vision is in there. And this game adds a ton of very interesting new features. First and foremost are these divided cards where they're actually split in half, usually two different characters, and when you play them on your turn, you can use whichever side that you desire. That's really neat. That's a really interesting mechanic, and it makes a lot of sense for some of these characters, like the aforementioned Cloak and Dagger. There's also Grievous Wounds, an even worse type of wound you can now get, that you actually have to do special things to KO. You can't just heal to get rid of them on your turn, which are devastating and can be pretty painful to receive, but I like that they changed things up from that wound stack, which before this was just kind of the same thing over and over again. At least it makes you think a little bit differently on your turn. There's also new pet Avengers that can get added to the sidekick stack. Who doesn't love those? And the size changing keyword, which I'm not actually a huge fan of because while it sounds cool in concept, essentially what it boils down to is just kind of making cards a little bit cheaper or making enemies a little easier to kill. Not really feeling like you're changing size, so I'm not crazy about that, the way they thematically implemented that. And of course, because this is Civil War, there's an Avengers versus X-Men scheme in there that actually, encourages you to only choose one or the other of those two teams for the cards that you choose on your turn. And a lot of other cool stuff. I like a lot of the characters. It's Civil War. It's okay. Speaking of X-Men, next on the list is the X-Men expansion, which of course comes with lots of X-Men. Some of the ones, fan favorites, at least for me, that weren't included earlier, like Jubilee, X-23, Psylocke, Beast. I think there was already a Beast, but now there's another Beast. There's like 2 or 3 Beasts in this game throughout the different expansions. But some really cool ones that I like. Again, this brings some interesting changes, new additions to the game. There's X-Gene, which is a new keyword that kind of just makes X-Men better with each other, isn't too exciting, just helps your team building. One that I really do like is Piercing Energy, where you can actually use a villain's victory points value as their health when you attack, which is really cool, really gives you some different options to play with. There's also some neat different things in this game that make the game harder. Epic Masterminds, as well as traps that can come out and are different from regular villains because, the game wasn't hard enough, so you can torture yourself even more on that front. And there's Heroic Bystanders, where you can actually rescue some bystanders and get to use them in your deck, which I really like. I really like the different types of bystanders to give you different abilities. That's a kind of a fun thing to do. One of my favorite schemes from this game is the Alien Brood scheme, which is similar to the Legendary Encounters Alien set, where the cards are actually flipped down and you have to scan them to find out what villains are coming out. That's just a really cool mechanic that I love from the Alien game, so it was nice to see them bring it over here. Overall, this is a pretty good set if you love the X-Men or you really are looking to up the difficulty level of your Legendary games. Next on my list, sort of a combo, I'm putting them together, Secret Wars Volumes 1 and 2. If I had to choose, I would probably put Volume 1 over Volume 2 because it does add some more interesting things, Sidekicks were introduced in this game, which is a new type of card that you can get on your turn that I really like as an option. It introduces multi-class heroes that can have actually multiple different classes, which again makes for some super unique combos in your deck. There are, like those bystanders I mentioned earlier that you could get in your deck, now there are actually villains that if you defeat go into your deck. Really makes it feel rewarding to take out one of those villains. Also in Secret Wars is a one versus all mode where one player actually plays as the mastermind versus the rest of the characters cooperatively, which is kind of cool, and I like that they went out there and added it. It's definitely interesting, although I don't know that anyone would really prefer to play this way over the regular game. I don't know how super fun it is to play as that mastermind versus a regular person, but it's kind of a neat addition to the game. There's lots of weird characters in here, including the captain and the devil, or the big old dinosaur dude, and some other fun ones that I like. So Secret Wars, it put them together. They add a ton of content to the game. My number one expansion for the big boxes of Legendary is Dark City, which was actually the first released expansion for Legendary and really adds a ton of content to the game. This draws from sort of the street level heroes of Marvel. Daredevil is in there, Iron Fist, a bunch of other cool ones. Daredevil is personally one of my favorite characters and heroes to play as in this game. This also was kind of the first time they really upped the difficulty level of the games, adding harder villains, harder masterminds for you to take on. It also came out with the advanced solo mode, which is big for me because I really like playing Legendary as a solo game, and I generally use those rules actually when I play. I think they improved on it a lot. And some great keywords in this game. Bribe, where you can use recruit points to defeat villains, not just attack points. Versatile, which allows your characters to either use recruit or attack on their turn. Teleport, which is something that like Nightcrawler, for example, can do, where you can keep a card from your hand and actually add it into your next hand on your next turn. What I really like about these keywords especially is they're simple, they make sense thematically with what they do, they feel like they fit well into the game. This expansion came out kind of at a time when there wasn't this bloat that I feel we sort of are starting to get in the Legendary set, where some of these keywords, when it says fifth circle of Kung Fu, and I have to look up what that means because I have no idea. When you see the word bribe, you know what that means. You can spend money to take out that villain. So this really, I feel, is kind of the essential expansion for Legendary. If you just have that base set, unless you really, love Guardians of the Galaxy or Spider-Man and want one of those small boxes, if you're looking at the big boxes, this, I think, is the one that almost feels like it completes the base set in a way. I really think that you need this if you want to have your Legendary games more difficult, more options, and it adds a bunch of really cool characters that I think are some of the more popular characters in the series. So that is my entire listing and ranking of these expansions from top to bottom. Honestly, I would probably put them in that order, even putting the big ones over most of the small ones, just because they come with so much more stuff. Like, it's hard to dispute that there's a lot going on in there. I really like all of them. The only ones that I'm a little iffy on are probably those first three, the Deadpool, Fear Itself, and SpiderMan Homecoming. The rest of them all range from, just okay to really, really good. So it kind of boils down to, if you're looking for ones that you want to purchase right now, which characters, as I said, do you really love? If you love Guardians or Fantastic Four, those are great picks. If you love any of the big boxes, you really can't go wrong with those. You want to add a bunch of XMen. They all add such a good variety of characters to the game that it's worth it. Villains is also kind of a weird one that's sort of up to you if you want to go into that. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend it until maybe later on down the road if you're a hardcore Legendary person like we are here at Roll for Crit. As far as the future of Legendary is concerned, as I said previously, I love when they reuse some of these keywords. I would especially love to see things like focus come back, or other aspects like those artifact cards. I really appreciate that. Honestly, they really don't even need to add any more keywords at this point. There are so many. I think they've done enough, unless there's something really special and unique that they can come up with. It's always fun to see those schemes, but I think they're kind of, they've, again, run the gamut on what those schemes can really do. There are a handful of characters that we still haven't seen yet in these games that I really like to. Namely, Ant-Man still not being in there, sort of a head scratcher. But Overall, they've hit most of the big bases for me. So going forward, just like to see more of those, a little more of those older keywords come back. I would love to hear what you think in the comments. Which of these expansions are your favorite? Which ones are your least favorite? If there's any villains or masterminds or schemes that you really like, I know that's one of the things I didn't get to go into too much in a lot of these just because there are so many. It's hard to delve into the details. For instance, Dark City has Capture Baby Hope that I forgot to mention, Rescue Baby Hope. It's the opposite, where you kind of has a token representing Baby Hope that I think really adds some cool mechanics to the game. Stuff like that. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, and we'll see what happens when the next Hulk expansion comes out for Legendary. There will be plenty more in the future. Will they ever stop? I don't know. Probably not, as long as Marvel is popular. Hey, until our next video, I'm Jonathan Estes, and this has been Roll for Crit.
Don't forget to click that like button and, of course, subscribe for even more excellent videos.
I subscribed and now I'm rich.